Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Cole. It's Sunday afternoon, June 8th, and this is the Week 5 announcement for Political Science 1013 for the summer 2025 term on the first 7-week schedule. Okay, everybody, a couple of things we have coming up. Your next exam will be a week from Monday. It'll be a week from today for those of you who are seeing this on Monday the 9th. It'll be Monday, June 16th, over Units 5 and 6 in the class notes on the executive branch, the presidency and the executive branch, and the federal bureaucracy in Unit 6. Now, I'll try to get started on the presidency unit and say a few words about it today, and then finish that up next time and say a few words about the pretty short Unit 6 on the federal bureaucracy. Everybody, the exam will be on Monday the 16th. Next weekend, what I will try to do is get the video out a little earlier than I usually do, on Saturday rather than Sunday, so that you will have it in advance of the exam. Remember, everybody, it's going to be over the 2 sets of class notes, units 5 and 6 on the presidency and the bureaucracy, plus 4 articles to be accessed online. Everyone, please get that announcement and check those links to be sure they work. And if there's any problem, I can make other arrangements to get the material to you. For the last exam, I had a message from a student who couldn't access a couple of the links, but that came to me on the day of the exam, which is kind of awkward. So we want to be sure we've looked at that material a few days before the exam at least, so that we can see about any problem with those links and make sure you can access the material. So the exam will be Monday the 16th, and that will be the third of our 4 exams in this short 7-week summer term. Everyone, a couple of other things coming up. This Thursday, the 12th, is the deadline to communicate with me about a term paper topic if you would like to do a term paper. Remember, it's optional. It's up to you to decide whether you want to do a term paper, but it could help raise a lower grade from earlier in the course. I think I've heard from a couple of people, but please note, the deadline on that is this Thursday, the 12th. The paper itself is due 2 weeks later, the 26th, and then the final exam is the next day, the 27th. We're going to try to do our 4th discussion this week. That will be Wednesday and Thursday, the 11th and 12th. You're asked to read a couple things about USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. Now, everyone knows that President Trump brought in Elon Musk to head up the DOGE initiative, Department of Government Efficiency. Now, of course, Trump and Elon Musk have had a falling out over the One Big Beautiful Bill, which Mr. Musk is not happy about. But in any case, before their falling out, Mr. Musk and the people he hired did go through the federal bureaucracy and tried to shut some things down, one of which was USAID. Any foreign aid that the United States government gives out now is going to apparently be given out directly by the State Department under the supervision of Secretary of State Rubio. Take a look at the readings. There are a couple of things linked in there for you to look at. See if you think whether or not we did the right thing on USAID, and we'll discuss that this Wednesday and Thursday. So this Wednesday and Thursday is the discussion. Term paper topics are due Thursday the 12th, and then the exam will be Monday the 16th. All right, let me say a few words then, everybody, about Unit 5 on the executive branch, on the presidency, and we will finish that up next week and say a few words about the very short unit on the federal bureaucracy, Unit 6. Okay. Well, we begin by going through a list of the recent presidents, going back to President Carter, who passed away just before the new year at age 100. We talk about Reagan, the 2 Bushes, Clinton, of course, Obama, Trump, and Biden. That pretty much covers it, I think. We talk about presidential roles, things the president is called upon to do. 2 of those are specified in the Constitution, that the president is to be chief executive and commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces. Then there are some other roles you will notice that have, you might say, have been foisted upon the president through the years informally, shall we say. Now, students probably will have heard that President Trump has issued a large number of executive orders. He likes to hold the executive orders up for the camera once he's signed them, and we have a photograph of that in the class notes, I believe. But he's issued these orders at a far greater rate than his predecessors. Notice the discussion I include in there is the so-called unified executive theory. This is a theory that President Trump and his advisors have seized upon to try to push the powers of the office further than they've been pushed before, and eventually the Supreme Court more than likely is going to be asked to rule on whether or not all that is legitimate. But that's worth taking a look at least for just a moment. Part of the issue is, can Congress limit his authority over independent agencies? Or does he have absolute authority over every such thing? That's a question that's going to be thrown in the laps of the courts. We go on to look at what the Constitution says about the president. The Constitution imposes a number of duties on the president, grants the president a number of powers. One of the duties is to inform Congress on the State of the Union, and so we have a picture in there of President Obama delivering one of his State of the Union addresses. Okay. Presidential power is especially fraught when it comes to military affairs and foreign policy, especially the war-making power. I mentioned that Congress during the Vietnam period imposed the War Powers Resolution on the president to try to limit presidential prerogative in this area and assert some of Congress's war-making power, because the Constitution says Congress shall have the power to declare war. Okay. Now, there's also a bit in there about impeachment, removal of the president by impeachment. Several presidents have been impeached, none have been removed that way. President Nixon very well might have been, but he resigned before he could be removed. 2 attempts were made to impeach and remove Trump. The second of those came after he left office to try to prevent him from running again, and neither one of those was successful. But notice what the class notes say about impeachment. Now, the Constitution also lays down the procedure for selecting or electing the president. But that has evolved in a little bit different direction than the founders anticipated. You'll notice we say it's laid out in the Constitution, but some constitutionally significant things have happened since then. For instance, the formation of the 2 national political parties. We now tend to think of it as a nationwide popular election, but we have to remember it's a state-by-state election because we have the institution of the Electoral College, which grants each state a certain number of electoral votes, and whoever finishes first in each state will get that state's electoral votes. So there have been a couple of instances in the year 2000 and 2016 when one candidate got more popular votes, but another candidate won in the Electoral College. And suffice it to say, that makes the Electoral College controversial. Now, everybody, the last couple of election cycles have been kind of unusual. In 2020, we were disrupted by the pandemic, and that affected the national political conventions. They had to be conducted virtually in 2020. Things were a little more normal for the conventions in 2024. But the 2024 campaign was kind of unusual because Donald Trump and Joe Biden both appeared to have sewn up their party's nominations early on. So the primaries to select the presidential candidates were not all that competitive. Of course, we know President Biden eventually felt compelled to withdraw. But let me run through the way it usually works. The candidates are formally nominated at the nominating conventions, where the delegates have to vote on the floor of the convention to nominate the party's candidate for president. The way we've been doing it for a generation or two now all the delegates, just about all of them, are selected in the states, generally in primary elections. A few states will hold caucuses to do this, a series of little small political meetings, but generally it's done by means of primaries. So the better you do in the primary in that state, the more delegates you get. Okay. The campaign, however, will start a year or more before that, because the presidential candidates have to organize as many as 50 state campaigns. So you've got to hit the ground running, raise money, try to get support in as many states as you can, especially the bigger, more important ones. Then in January of the election year, the primaries and caucuses will begin. Now, generally we begin with the New Hampshire primary and the Iowa caucuses. But the Iowa caucuses have become controversial. It's not clear whether Iowa will continue to have caucuses. Generally, the preferred method by which most of the states do it in both the Republican and the presidential and the Democratic parties is to hold primaries in each state. And the better you do in the primary, the more delegates you get from that state. Then in the summer, we go to the convention where the candidates are formally nominated. Now, back in the day, this used to be a lot more competitive than it is now. Generally, what we find happens is that by March or April of the presidential election year, there'll be a front runner in each party and sort of a bandwagon effect in support of that front runner after they win a series of primaries. Okay. If you don't do well in the first primaries, it's difficult to keep going. So generally, by the spring, it's pretty clear to us who the nominees of each party are going to be. Then they are formally nominated at the nominating conventions in the summer, which they don't quite attract the attention they did in the past, the nominating conventions. Back in the day, and we sent you that study. Look at the clips in that Unit 5 links announcement that I sent you. You see clips from nominating conventions and campaigns back in the day. As recently as 1960, delegates would arrive at the convention unsure about who the nominee would be. There might be dickering and bargaining among the party leaders to see who the nominee eventually would be. But in more recent times, we generally find that what happens is the primaries get started, a front runner soon emerges, and there's a bandwagon to that front runner in each party. And generally by the spring, it is clear who the nominee will be. And so the conventions are held to formally nominate those candidates and transact some other business, but mainly to nominate the presidential candidates. Then we're ready for the general election campaign, although these days, with the nominees pretty clear early on, we can look at the general election campaign as starting really back in the spring over the course of the summer. But by Labor Day, it will be well underway. The future of the presidential debates is sort of up in the air. We had a commission on presidential debates that took the debates over from the League of Women Voters, but the past couple of campaigns, the candidates have bypassed the Commission on Presidential Debates. Last time around, between Trump and Harris, there was only one presidential debate. So the future of that, all that is uncertain. So the general election will be held the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, and you have to get a majority, 270 electoral votes at least, to be elected President of the United States. All right, everybody, we will try to finish up on Unit 5 and take a brief look at Unit 6 next time before the exam, which will be on Monday the 16th. We're going to try to get the video out no later than Saturday the 14th, so you all will have that before the exam on Monday the 16th. You have an announcement about the exam with 4 links to 4 outside readings to be done. Again, please look at those in advance of the exam so I can get that to you in case of any problem or in case you should hit any paywall. Okay. Discussion this Wednesday and Thursday. Term paper topics are due Thursday. And once again, we're going to try to talk to you once again along about Saturday the 14th in advance of the exam on Sunday the 16th. Take it easy, study hard, contact me with any problems, issues, or questions through the course website, the inbox, or at david.cole@opsu.edu. Take it easy.